All right then, so I am back with another build. This one, if you've seen the title on the thumbnail, you must be thinking, what? And yes, I understand it's taking me, what is it, 7 videos to finally go insane. But trust me when I say, this build is probably one of the most fun builds I've ever made. So I'm going to get into it rather quickly, because I feel like the actual build itself, as far as your levels, there's not actually as much to say here. So I kind of want to just get into the important stuff first. And we're actually going to start with the race, because the race here is the most important thing. You want to go with a Dwergar dwarf. We want to be a dwarf anyway if we're trying to build Mario, because he is a short king. 2, Dwergar are going to get some unique racial abilities that fit Mario perfectly. And 3, there's going to be a certain piece of equipment that we're going to use that requires us to be a dwarf to get the most out of it. So going a Dwergar is literally perfect. As far as, your background and such is concerned, you can take whatever you like. But I definitely feel like Dwergar is so essential to this build that you absolutely have to take it. So our starting level is going to be Rogue. And I feel like we're taking a Rogue here because you're going to get a lot of things from the first level of Rogue that we are going to want. So with the goals of this build are to build a character who can use jumping to the best of its ability. So not only are we going to be able to jump really high, jump really far, but we're also going to want to be able to jump at our enemies and actually be able to weaponize our ability to jump. And I figured out a way to do that, and it is so cool. So we're starting off as a rogue, mainly because I want to get proficiencies. We're going to want a couple of proficiencies with this build, and I think it's going to be super important that we get not only our proficiencies, but our expertise as well. Also, we're going to be taking levels of Rogue anyway for specific abilities that we want, so starting off Rogue is actually pretty good here. So let's move on to our ability scores. Now, I need to clarify this because I realized I haven't been clarifying this in my videos, and this was pointed out to me in a comment that I should really clarify this because a lot of people don't really use respecking. So I'm going to say this now. The stats that I show in my build are always the final stats your character will have. This means that if I'm using equipment such as the Amulet of Greater Health, or the Gauntlets of Hill Giant Strength, or the Gloves of Dexterity that you get later in the game, these are the stats you want after a respec. Until you get these pieces of equipment, you're going to want to use a more standard stat spread until you can get your hands on those pieces of equipment, and then you respec into these stats. I apologize if that's not been clear before, because obviously in a lot of my builds, I just keep a 10 Constitution, which means you're really going to struggle until you get the Amulet of Greater Health in Act 3. So basically you will be taking a more standard stat spread until you get the equipment that you can use to allow yourself to respec into more optimized stats. That is how my builds work, and I will endeavor to remind people of this in my videos, but please assume that whenever I make a build, I am assuming that you go into the knowledge into these build videos with the knowledge of the game, and that you can respec, and that you will respec later to fit this build. My goal with these videos is to show a finalized build, not necessarily go through every single step to get there, because that would double the length of these videos, and I like to assume that the people that watch these videos do kind of have a general idea of how to make builds and just want ideas. But it's a fair criticism, and I will endeavor to be more clear with this information in the future. So let's look at the final stats for this build. We're going with Strength at 17 for obvious reasons. It increases our jump distance and our ability to shove people, and obviously use various strength-related abilities such as athletics. Definitely something you want to have on this build, for sure. Next up, we have Dexterity at 14. This is also a really important stat for this build, and you'll see why later. So we definitely want to have it at around 14. Constitution at 10, we are using the Amulet of Greater Health in this build. I tried to avoid it, but this build is too multi-ability score dependent to not use it. However, obviously, if you want to have a decent con score in the early game, take out some points in Wisdom, maybe drop your dex down to, maybe drop your Strength down a little bit, and use Constitution until you can get into a better state where you can use the equipment and such. But yeah, you definitely want this kind of stat spread. Intelligence and Charisma don't matter. But let's get on to the skill proficiencies. I have taken skills in Acrobatics and Athletics and given them both expertise. This is really important. Athletics is one of our most important stats because it lets us do all the physical aspects of the game, and you can do a lot of shoving with this build thanks to your maneuverability. So if you see an opportunity to shove an enemy off a cliff and just get it out of combat right away, Athletics is going to let you do that. You jump to an enemy, push them, and they're out of combat, and you will be able to jump pretty much across entire battle arenas in a single bound. This build goes crazy. And then conversely, there's Acrobatics. On the off chance you are jumping to someone to push them off a cliff and they don't go off, which is unlikely, then they obviously have the ability to shove you off. Acrobatics is going to let you resist that. Also, I think it's kind of thematic to have Acrobatics expertise as Mario. The other abilities can be whatever you like. We've got Deception, Intimidation, and Persuasion here. This is mainly just bumping up our social stats because our Charisma is quite low, but you can take things that are more appropriate, like in fact I will change Intimidation to Perception, and I might change Deception to Insight or Investigation, just to give you some more options in combat, but you always want to take Persuasion Proficiency here if you're not getting it another way, because it is an important stat. Okay, moving on. He looks a bit more... Oh, Jesus. He looks a bit more like Mario here. Right, so... Next up, we are a Rogue 2. And I think you're definitely going to want to take Rogue 2 a bit earlier, because your ability to dash and disengage as a bonus action is quite important. So you can either go Rogue here, or you can do our multi-class here. Again, I don't show these builds in the order that you need to take for levels. I just go from shortest to highest after going our starting class. What I mean by that is I show the starting class first, and then I show, if we take one level in this class, I show that first. If we only take 3 levels in the next class, I show that next. So I go from least amount of levels to most amount. So I'm going to keep going with Rogue here, but I think at this point you will want to multi-class into the class we're going to be using in a minute. But we get our bonus action, dash, and disengage here, which is going to be super, super important for this build, because it is going to give us more maneuverability, which is something that we want. And it's also, our dash is going to be able to trigger some unique aspects of this build that will come up later. So definitely want to get something like this. Next up, we are a Rogue 3, and it's obvious, we're taking the Thief here. We really, really want that second bonus action. It is super, super important that we get our hands on this, because it is going to enable us to do a ton of things with this build in regards to our mobility. In addition, we get second story work, which means we gain resistance to falling damage, which is a nice bonus to have. If there's a chance that for some reason you don't have feather fall in your character, but you really, really need to get the jump on somebody, forgive the pun, second story work is going to cut that damage you take from falling in half, so definitely something you want to have. And here we're going to get one of our big pieces of racial kit, Enlarge. Grow in size and become stronger. I believe this gives you like a buff to strength checks and a few other things, and a buff to your damage when you use Enlarge, but obviously the thematic aspect here is Mario eats the mushroom and gets bigger. This fits the build so well. I believe this works once per long rest. Yeah, here we go. You gain advantage on ability checks, saving throws using strength, and weapon attacks deal an additional 1d4 damage. A really, really nice build. Take this in a build skill. Take this into a boss fight and absolutely throw hands. It doesn't require concentration or anything like that, so you can do other things as well. Super, super cool use of our race to get a nice thematic aspect. And as I said, we're going Thief. Next up, we are a Rogue level 4, which means we're not going to be taking Rogue. I almost made a mistake there. I was so in my own head. We're going to be multi-classing to Monk here. Like I said, you could choose to take this at level 2 and then maybe go to level 5 in Monk for extra attack or whatever, and then come back to Rogue. In fact, that's probably the more optimal thing to do, but you always want to start with Rogue because we want those expertise. Anyways, starting as a Monk, we're going to get a few things. Flurry of Blows, a really, really nice way of dealing extra damage with our bonus action, of which we will have 2 of. So you can do 2 Flurry of Blows, which means you're going to be getting a lot of damage with this. We're going to get key points here that will fuel our abilities. Unarmored defense, so we get to wear clothing instead of having to wear light armor, which is really, really nice. That's going to give us a lot more maneuverability with... Where is it? We don't get unarmored movement yet. We will get unarmored movement. Martial arts, dexterous attacks. Attacks with monk weapons and unarmed attacks scale with your dex instead of your strength. Our strength is going to be higher, so this is not relevant. Death strikes. Monk weapons and unarmed attacks deal wonderful bludgeoning damage unless their normal damage is higher. This will give us a bump to our unarmed strikes, which we will be using. And whenever we have to make an attack with a monk weapon, we are going to be, or an unarmed strike, we get to make a second unarmed attack as a bonus action. Bing bang bosh, you're getting lots of attacks. Super, super, super good. Next up, at Monk level 2, we are going to be getting our unarmored movement. This is going to increase our movement speed, which is super, super cool. We're also going to be getting things like Patient Defense, Step of the Wind, which is Step of the Wind Dash and Step of the Wind Disengage. Probably never ever going to use Step of the Wind here because we have our bonus action Dash and Hide and Disengage from that. So there's no point in spending a key point in order to do the same thing that we can do already for free. Patient Defense can be good though, and I would actually recommend using it if you think an enemy is going to deal a lot of damage to you. It absolutely can save your life in certain breakneck situations. We're also going to get another racial feature here. This is invisible, not really on theme, but it is a nice thing to have, although it does cost concentration, so I wouldn't recommend using this in combat. However, for roleplay aspects, or if you need to sneak into somewhere like the counting house, for example, this is a really, really good ability to have. Next up, we're at Monk level 3. We have, at this level, we get an additional key point, and also deflect missiles, a nice little way to return fire on projectiles that come from ranged weapons. It's pretty, pretty cool. Now, here's where it gets a bit interesting. We get our subclass here, and you have options here. I have already built a Way of the Four Elements Monk, which was my Nero build, and I do believe that if you're making a Mario build, if you want to take into account all of Mario's abilities over the years, like, for example, the Fire Flower or the Ice Flower, you're going to want to go with the Way of the Four Elements Monk in order to be able to get like things like Fangs of the Fire Snake, Burning Hands, and the Blade of Rhyme, to be able to use his fire and ice abilities. However, if you want to focus more on Mario's base kit and don't care so much about the Fire Flower and such, and you want a more powerful build overall, you're going to want to go with Way of the Open Hand. You are going to get way more out of your unarmed strikes this way, and I feel like if you want a super powerful build, Open Hand is the way to go. I do believe that you will, you'll get more out of Way of the Open Hand, but if you want to focus on Mario's abilities, go for Elements. However, I'm going to go Open Hand here because I actually want to build an Open Hand Monk. Simple as that. So at level 4, we are going to be getting our first feat, and we are going to be taking Tavern Brawler, because if you don't, you are nerfing yourself into the ground. Tavern Brawler on this build is insane, because it's going to be doing more than just giving us the double bonus to our strength attacks that we got on the Nero build. It is going to be doing a lot more for us. Whenever we make an unarmed attack, use an improvised weapon, or throw something, that's going to be relevant, your strength modifier is added twice to the damage and attack rolls. It is super, super good. Also, it's a half feat, allowing us to bump up our strength and use the potion of everlasting strength that you get in Act 2 to bump our strength to 20. Really, really powerful option for us here, and it would be ridiculous not to take it. So we are taking Tavern Brawler here. Next up, we are a Monk 5, and this is where we get our extra attack, as well as an additional key point. Extra attack just fits into this build nicely, as it does with any martial build. Nothing much to say here, you just get your extra attack after taking the attack action, or an action that is considered an attack. I'm not going to go into the details. We also get Stunning Strike here. I mentioned in the Nero build that this is a nice ability to have, but the chances of it going off are usually very, very low, especially in the late game, so it's not really going to be the center point of this build, but it is a nice clutch option to have. Next up, we are a monk level 6, which means we're going to be getting a shit ton of stuff. An extra key point, as always, but we're also getting our improved on our movement. Your movement speed increases by 4.5 meters while you are not wearing armor or using a shield. There's a little bit of confusion about this. This does not mean you are getting this in addition to the previous unarmored movement buff we get. This is just an upgrade to that. So you're not getting like 3 plus 4.5. That's not how it works. Just so so we're getting a 4.5 meter bonus to our base speed, just in case you weren't aware. We also get key empowered strike, which means our unarmed attacks count as magical for the sense of overcoming resistance and immunity. Pretty good. As an open hand monk, we are also going to be getting the manifestations of body, mind, and soul, basically allowing us to do 4 to 7 extra damage of a chosen type. I would usually pick psychic unless you're up against mind flayers, because I think this is the least resisted damage type, but you can change these up on the fly for like no extra cost. So it's pretty nice to have overall. We also get Wholeness of Body, which is going to let us get a little bit of healing, regain half our key points, and for 3 turns, we get an extra bonus action. With the Thief, we get 3 bonus actions for 3 turns when we use this feature. It's insane. You are going to be doing insane amounts of damage per combo. So if you go attack, extra attack, flurry of blows, unarmed extra attack, and whatever else you got packed away in that extra action of yours. It could be a jumping on an enemy, it could be doing anything. You just get so much maneuverability. I feel like this build is amazing for boss fights, where it can just focus down a single enemy, but again, is also really good for maneuverability for taking out groups of enemies by going one to the other to the other. You get a lot of variation with this build, and it's just insanely powerful. At the end of the day, this might actually be one of my strongest builds, which is crazy to me. Monks in this game, compared to 5th edition, are busted broken. Next up, we're going to be getting a monk. We're at monk 7, which means we're going to be getting evasion. When a spell or effect that would deal half damage on a successful dex throw, it deals no damage. So basically, if you had to roll a dex save to save yourself from damage, on a success, you take no damage. And on half damage, you only take half damage on a fail. Really, really good ability. Definitely want to have this in our kit. We get it for free, so there's no worries about it. And then if you are charmed or frightened, you automatically remove the condition. Cool. It's always nice to have resistances to status effects. Nice, nice, nice. We're going through this pretty quickly because with Open Hand Monk, there's usually not a lot to talk about on a level-to-level basis. Anyways, at level 8 Monk, we are getting a feat, and we are going to be taking the Athlete feat. This is going to allow us to get up from being prone by only using up a little bit of our movement speed, but also our jump distance increases by 50%. With the amount of jumping distance bonuses we're stacking on this build, this means we're going to be able to jump incredible distances. As I was kind of traversing the world trying to get things set up so I could do this video, I was able to do some really insane things. For example, I was able to jump from the bottom of the temple where you find withers at the start of the game, you know, where you meet Shadowheart and all that, up to the top in like 2 jumps. It was insane. And also, with the amount of jumping we're getting, you can actually jump across the world faster than you can, you know, just traverse it normally. And I think it's actually what speedrunners use in this game, like jumping with like enhanced leap in this feat to like get super far in such a short amount of time. So this is technically like a speed build as well, which I find very, very, very cool. But it's also a half feat as well, which means we're going to be taking a +1 to our dexterity here, and now is the time where you would use, and for our, well, I suppose now would not be the time at level 11, but this is where I'll discuss Auntie Ethel's Boon. If you have, Auntie Ethel's Boon should be used on your dexterity here. With the +1 to that and the +1 from this feat, you will have a total of 16 dexterity at the end of the day, so we have decent all-around stats, which is really, really good. So yeah, take your +1 to dex here, and then use Auntie Ethel's Boon on your dex as well to get a total of 16. Next up, we are a monk level 9 at our final level, and this is where we're going to be getting advanced unarmored movement. Difficult terrain doesn't slow you down, which is nice, and you can jump an additional 6 meters. This is why I wanted to go this high in monk. We get a massive increase to our jumping distance with this. We're also going to be getting the key resonation abilities, basically punch an enemy, fill them up with key, and then detonate it for free later on. And it damages the enemy and also anyone else within 5 meters of it. It's a decent ability. I don't think you'll be using this as much as something like Flurry of Blows, but it is a nice extra option to have to deal with groups of enemies that are bundled together. And with that, we are at the end of the build, so now we need to get into the equipment, and the equipment, like most of my builds, is what absolutely makes this build. It is super, super important that we take the equipment that we do. So, let's get into it. Oh, I meant to take that off. My mistake. Put this on. So, this is the equipment we're working with here. It's obvious there's a lot going on here, but all of this equipment is benefiting our jumping ability and our movement in some way. So let's get into it. Obviously, I've already said this, we have the Amulet of Greater Health to bump our constitution. We need it because we need to put points into so many other things, and there's just no reason not to take it here. However, you're not going to have this equipped 100% of the time, as I suggest that while you're traversing the world and you know you're not going to be getting into combat, I would recommend having the Corvid token in your back pocket, because this is going to give you Featherfall. Now, it says in the description, while polymorph or wild shaped, you also gain Featherfall. It's currently bugged, as if you just equip it, it gives you Featherfall anyway. I've tested it and it works. This is Featherfall with no caveat. This is obviously not how this is intended to be used, so there is a high likelihood that this will get patched. Since we don't get Featherfall on this build any other way, it will be worth your while to have someone in your party that can cast it. However, while this item is in the state that it's in, it's quite easy just to swap these two out as needed. If you don't want to use the Amulet of Greater Health, you can also use the Sentient Amulet, which you can get as early as Act 1, which is actually going to give you the ability to restore key points equal to your martial arts die. So that's pretty cool. You also get Shadow for free. So there's also a nice little quest line involving this. So it's definitely worth having about. Let's move on to the rings, just to get these out of the way. The Ring of Jumping. It lets you cast Jump as a bonus action. It's once per short rest, so it's going to triple your jumping distance. This is if, like, for some reason there's somewhere really, really far off or high up that you want to get to, and even your current jumping ability isn't going to work. This is going to triple our already existing jumping distance. When I was talking about earlier the feats where I was able to jump from the top to the top of the fortress and all that, and like jumping like the length of bridges and such, I was doing most of that without this. So this is going to do a lot for your build. Basically just being able to enhance that jump. And it's going to be useful in combat as well, because again, it's going to cost one of our potentially 3 bonus actions to use. So if there's that thing that's just a little bit out of reach, you're going to be able to reach it. Super, super fun addition to this build. Next up, this is the Emerald Ring. The mod I used to get all this equipment and level up quickly so I can make these builds, for some reason, it didn't have the ability to get Crusher's Ring, which is basically what this ring is. Like, this is called the Emerald Ring. It can't be obtained through normal gameplay, but there is basically an exact copy of it called Crusher's Ring, which you get from as early as Act 1 from the Goblin Camp. So you're going to want to get Crusher's Ring to increase your movement speed by 3. It just gives you a little bit of extra movement. But if you find that that's not necessary, you can equip literally any other ring here. But I just like this because as a platforming character, having a bit more movement in addition to being able to jump is always nice. So yeah, grab Crusher's Ring here. Onto the armor pieces. This is the Mask of Soul Perception. This is actually quite an impressive piece of kit. It gives you a +2 bonus to attack rolls, initiative rolls, and perception checks, and also gives you Detect Thoughts, I believe, once per long rest. Yes. It is... What happened there? Okay. It's a pretty dang good headpiece just to have as a generic option. I couldn't find anything that really worked with this build thematically, so having the Mask of Soul Perception here just to give us a flat bonus to our attack rolls is really, really nice. So yeah, definitely want to pick this one up. But in the meantime, you can use The marksmanship hat to gain a +1 bonus to ranged and thrown attack rolls. For some reason it says a +1 bonus to all attack rolls. This is not true. It is ranged and thrown. This is mislabeled. I guess the description is wrong. Don't believe its lies. Also, we have the Scabby Pugilist Circlet if you want to get an additional 2 damage from your weapon and unarmed strikes when surrounded by foes. Pretty nice ability. Next up, we have the Cloak of Displacement. At the beginning of the wearer's turn, the cloak activates, granting enemies disadvantage on attack rolls that target the wearer. This effect lasts until the wearer takes damage. Just a little bit of extra kit to stop you from getting hit for a little while. I mean, you could put on the Cloak of Protection here if you'd rather have a bonus to your AC. There's a few other things you can do with this, but overall, this is a nice bit to have. The Graceful Cloth. This is going to be our main piece of clothing that we're going to be using with an armored defense. You gain Cat's Grace and increase your dexterity score by 2 to a maximum of 20. You gain a +1 bonus to dexterity saving throws and also increase your jump distance by an extra 1.5 meters. There is an alternate version of this outfit you can get that has the same name, and you can get it in Act 2, whereas... Wait, actually, you get this one at the start of Act 2, but you can get the other one a little bit further into Act 2, which gives you a +1 bonus to your unarmed strikes and throw attacks. So either or is good. It depends if you want a higher dex score or a higher jump. With this piece of armor, you actually have a total 18 dex, so I'd absolutely probably recommend going with this one, just for the extra jump distance and the extra dexterity. Also, Cat's Grace here is really, really nice because it helps with falling damage as well, and it gives you advantage on any dexterity check, so lockpicking becomes a lot easier. It's a really, really powerful piece of kit to get as early in the game as you can. Fleet Fingers. Running jump. Once per turn after the wearer takes a dash action, they can jump without using a bonus action. So, if you use your cunning action dash, you get a free jump as well, in addition to all our other stuff. So, pretty cool. I mean, this isn't essential to the build. If you feel like you're not using that free action jump that often, feel free to replace this with something that would buff your unarmored attacks, for example. Like, you know, those skills that give you like an extra 1d4, and you can actually get those gloves that give you 1d4 fire damage and the ability to cast Scorching Ray if you still want that little bit of Fire Flower ability. So I actually think that could work quite nicely here. I've literally just thought of that now. Probably should have tried to do that a bit earlier, but hey ho. And here we have the Bone Spike Boots. This is how we're going to be weaponizing our jumps. You have gained a +1 to armor class and saving throws as long as you are not wearing armor or holding a shield. Cool. Jump distance is increased by another 1.5 meters. Also cool. But then you get a little something called Brutal Leap. Leap at a target and possibly knock it prone. Basically, you jump at a target that you actually have to click on to target them, and then once you land near them, they have a chance to fall prone. It is a strength save. This is a super cool ability because it essentially means that when you jump at an enemy, you knock them prone, and then all your attacks against them that you're going to get from your attack, your extra attack, your flurry of blows, blah, 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 they're all done with advantage, which means more chance for critical hits. Pretty much always going to be hitting. So this is literally a build of knock an enemy down by literally throwing yourselves at them and then just beat the ever-loving snot out of them while they're on the ground. It is a super fun combo if you're able to pull it off. And on the off chance that you don't get the prone from the jump, you can also attempt to do it with your flurry of blows, the topple variant. So you'll get 2 chances to knock them prone in a turn, which is super, super fun. And now we're onto the weapon. Now, I feel like a lot of people wouldn't actually think of Mario as using a weapon, but Mario does have the hammer power-up, and as soon as I saw this weapon, I knew it had to be part of this build. So, it's a +2 weapon, so you're getting a +2 enchantment constantly. Homing weapon. This weapon will return to its owner when thrown. So, it functions a bit like the hammer power-up from Mario, where you throw the weapon, and then, you know, you can keep throwing hammers, and you keep hitting your enemy with them, so it's super, super cool. But here's the kicker. A dwarf throwing this this warhammer deals an extra 1 to 8 bludgeoning damage. If the target is large, huge, or gargantuan, it deals an additional 2 to 16 bludgeoning damage. This just... I had built Mario as a dwarf before I even saw this weapon existed, and it was just... God, it was so perfect. So we're getting Mario's, like, iconic hammer. And we get the ability to throw it, make big attacks with it, and it counts as a monk weapon because it's not heavy or two-handed. I know, most people wouldn't even think of warhammers as being monk weapons, but they are. So, and we get proficiency with it just for being a dwarf. So yeah, This will trigger our unarmed strikes. It'll work with all of our monk abilities. It's just a ton of things. So your average combat round is actually going to be more throwing your hammer. So even in close range, most of the times where I tried to do this, I still had like a 90% chance to hit, even with disadvantage. So it's quite potent with this build. So basically, throw your hammer, and then throwing your hammer counts as an attack. So you can actually do it again as an extra attack or do a regular attack. So throwing your weapon this way counts as an attack. So it triggers everything that this build can do. This is a really, really powerful weapon that I don't think I've seen anyone else use. Super, super, super cool, and it fits the build perfectly. As for our bow, the dark fire short bow, it gives us haste, and since we have nothing else that we're concentrating on, there's no reason not to use our haste here, and it also gives us the resistance to fire and cold. It's just good. We're never going to be using it for the ranged attack, because obviously throwing our hammer, and because of our high strength we can throw it really far, is always going to be the better option. But the ability to cast haste is just, it's too much to pass up. So you can cast haste once per long rest with this. So I definitely think that this build is going to be going all in on bosses in particular. So you can start the fight with haste, do a weapon throw, jump over to the enemy, beat them down with flurry of blows, use wholeness of body, get another bonus attack, keep fighting. I think in total with haste you get haste attack, haste extra attack, attack, extra attack. You can go for your jumping attack or any other bonus attack. So you get 3 bonus attacks. That is 7 attacks per turn if you have haste up. Not to mention the damage buffs you get from the wholeness of body, mind, and soul. Where is it? I've lost myself. The flurry of blows, the stunning strikes, the key resonance blasts, enlarge, which just gives us a passive damage bonus on everything. This build, when I was testing the open hand variant, and again, I wish I didn't lose the footage for this, during the tutorial fight, I killed every single enemy in that tutorial fight on Tactician, solo, with like, I think 9 or 10 turns remaining on the countdown. It was the fastest I had ever defeated those enemies, and I'm talking Commander Zake, the 2 Cambions, and all the imps and balls that spawn in, and the Mind Flayer. All of them gone in like a few turns. This build, I don't want to say it is the most powerful build I've made, so I'm not entirely sure if that's true overall, because other builds have a bit more utility to them, and that can be really useful in this game. But as far as being a raw combat, like power and maneuverability, it is super strong. Super, super strong. I think maybe Open Hand Monk might be one of the strongest single classes in the game, but don't quote me on that. Like, and the fact that we get to have all the little flavor of Mario with the jumping and the stomping on enemies and the using a hammer, like, it would be really funny for the person who makes this build and their friend basically both make the same build, but have one be Mario, one be Luigi, and you're basically playing like one of the Mario and Luigi RPGs. That would be so funny. I think that could be really, really fun to do. Overall, this actually might want to be one of my favorite builds. It is obviously kind of a joke build, but overall, I think it is super, super fun, and I highly, highly recommend it. The more this build came together, the more crazy I was getting. It was so much fun to test. But like I said, I will go over this quickly because I don't have all the buffs here. With the Potion of Everlasting Strength, this will be a 20. With RTF Spoon, this will be an 18. And the rest of the stats are the same. The only thing that kind of sucks here is the low Wisdom. But we are getting quite a few things here, so we're getting quite a lot of things from our Strength and Dex and less from our Wisdom. This does mean your enemies will have a bit less of a tough time with the saving throws on some of your monk abilities, but overall I still find they work majority of the time, and a lot of the main status effects you're inflicting will actually be coming from your other abilities. So yeah, that is the build. I'll be showing some combat footage now. I'm not too sure I actually have much left to say on this build. I initially was trying to just make a platformer build, so I was trying to make a nondescript platformer character that was just really, really fast, could jump really high, and had some unique things. If you want to kind of do this build but have more movement speed, instead you could go with like a wood half-elf, which gets the buff to their speed as well. But I honestly think that you'd be missing so much playing dwarf in this case, but you'd be missing out on what you'd get by playing dwarf. So definitely think this is probably one of the most fun builds I've ever made, and I would highly recommend it to anybody who just wants to goof around on like a second playthrough or something. Seriously fun. I would say if you go the 4 elements route, you definitely just kind of want to take Fangs of the Fire Snake, because that gives quite a decent buff, and a few other things, but honestly, I think Open Hand is just way more fun for this build. So yeah, I think that's me done. My next build video, I'm not sure when it's going to come about. I'll try and get one done for Sunday, so as of the time of recording this, that's tomorrow. But I'm still theory crafting something. I think I might want... I've got a couple of things here. And I'm going to actually make a YouTube poll so people can like vote on this, but I've got a couple of things I want to do here. I'm either going to have my next set of builds be another group of 4 character builds, so 4 characters that are from a group that will work together in this game, in which case I will actually be challenging myself to build those builds without any repeating equipment or subclasses, so I think that could be a fun little challenge, or I could be making a unique build for each in-game party member. Because when I made the Psionic Warrior, I made that build with a Gif Yankee, so it actually works perfectly well for Lays L. And then that got me thinking, what other unique builds could I make for each of the other party members? So Gale, Karlach, Astarion, all of them. So I actually think I could do an interesting set of builds where I build something unique for each character, as almost like here's a powerful and interesting way to build this specific character without taking away from their whole identity. So throwing that one out there, like I say, I will make a YouTube poll if you guys want me to keep doing character builds, or if you want me to take a little bit of a shot at doing these themed builds for each of the in-game characters. But yeah, that is going to be me for now. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Peace out. Do the Murray.